Croft.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to begin my speech by thanking the Minister for finally providing time to debate this extremely important issue. It might interest the member for South Holland and the Deepings that I've actually been requesting this debate since the 22nd of March, and I was grateful to everybody in the Chamber on the 19th of April who were also requesting this debate. But the government's strategy was published on the 9th of April, and finally, on the 22nd of May, we are finally getting the chance to debate it. But since first calling for this debate, in London alone, we have lost 20 people in violent murders. Now, before I begin, I really would want to urge the Minister to listen and genuinely take on board the comments made by members across the House today. This is not an issue that we can afford to play politics with. We know the rise in youth violence doesn't just happen overnight, so we must also realise that developing the right solutions also won't happen overnight. We will not fix violence with a few years' worth of funding in a single parliamentary term. This requires cross-party working on a generational scale. We need a long-term strategy which government after government, and I hope one of those after governments is Labour, will continue to implement, no matter who is in power. We owe this to every person who has lost their life to violence, to every family who has lost a loved one, and to every community still traumatised by violence. Now, many members will know that I am keen that we genuinely seek to address this issue, and this has been driven by what I've seen locally. Since I was first elected, we have lost 7 young lives. Shaqwan Fearon, 17, Nazim Galiz, 17, Kaba Kamara, 23, Jamar Walker, 15, Myron Yard, 17, Rukewi Tadafi, 21, and Leonardo Zameki, 16. Madam Deputy Speaker, in one school year, Lewisham Deptford lost 7 young people to violent deaths. Many teenagers in my constituency know somebody who has been stabbed or murdered, and this literally breaks my heart. These young people were part of our local community. They have family, friends, people who are now grieving and hurting. Nobody quite understands why their life was taken so needlessly, so senselessly. If this happened at a football stadium, in a workplace, we would rightly be crying out for a public inquiry. In London, we've had over 60 murders since the start of this year. So we all know that government needs to act. We all need to act and do something different. We need to get in there and understand the root causes, what early interventions we can have that ensure no young person carries a knife and certainly never uses one, because prevention and early intervention is what it must be about. No young person is born carrying a knife. Something happens that leads them to feel they need to, be it fears over safety or a desire to fit in. So thankfully, we all recognise now that prevention and early intervention is better than cure. Now, I do compliment the government for this. This strategy rightly states that the only way to truly tackle violence is with early intervention and prevention. It talks about using teachable moments to engage with young people. But I don't believe saying that teachable moment is when a kid turns up at A&E stabbed is good enough. Why only then do they have a youth worker who will work with them? I want us to be far more ambitious. I believe we need to start far, far earlier, working with the family from birth, providing support such as Sure Start, which works with the child and the family from a preschool age. Let's have that as the teachable moment. Or does this not provide a good enough photo opportunity? The media and the government, when talking about this issue, always seems to glamorise it. The media with photos of gangsters or knives and makes areas out to be the hood, and government with a photo op in A&E or with ex-gangsters. Now, I want to say our young people are cool. They're cool because they are our future lawyers, bankers, nurses, doctors, social workers, footballers, music artists, or indeed politicians. They can go on and achieve anything, and we've got to ensure we provide them with the opportunities so they can do anything. And if I'm going to be quite brutal, the government has provided an excellent analysis of the problem, but quite frankly, this is not a decent enough strategy. It's tinkering on the edges. And £40 million, it just isn't enough. And especially when you consider that at the same time, £387 million has been cut from our youth services. Now, the Cross-Party Commission, which myself and the honourable members for Streatham, Braintree, the cities of London and Westminster, Glasgow South West and the honourable member for North Norfolk have been working on with our academic partners, Warwick University, is studying the underlying causes of youth violence for nearly 2 years. We conducted a national survey in February this year of over 2,200 young people looking at their experiences of violence. Over 70% of young people told us they are exposed to serious violence in real life at least once a month. And younger respondents aged 8 to 19 experience the most serious violence. Over 16% of young people said they do not feel safe in their own home. And 38% of young people know at least one person who sells drugs, and shockingly, almost 10% know more than 10 people who do. 40% of young people agree that it's easy to buy illegal drugs where they live. And 33% know at least one person who carries a weapon. 7% know more than 10 people who do. Put simply, this shows us that our young people are experiencing adverse childhood experiences far too often, and we must do more to address this. And I was pleased to see the government's strategy referencing ACEs with the need to have a trauma-informed approach to policing, the youth justice system and looked after children. And I was also pleased to see that Forces in Wales will be piloting a public health approach. We already know from the work of the Violence Reduction Unit in Scotland that closer integration of services and communities can produce extremely positive results. But with just 7 million allocated to this, following 58.8 million cuts to Welsh policing, surely this does not even fill that gap. And with 59% cuts to the Youth Justice Board and countering this, an increase in spending of 23% of what we have to spend on our looked after children, we do have to question, are we paying for failure? Because we haven't invested in youth services, children's services and schools. But we do know that investing in and taking a public health approach to addressing serious violence, listening to communities, not dictating to them, seeing the evidence of how this works from Scotland, as stated by the Honourable Member for Edinburgh South West, Chicago and elsewhere, can have dramatic results. And with Birmingham, Reading and many London boroughs looking to replicate this, surely it's time we seek to do this on a wider scale to empower our communities to do this and look for a public health approach. Now, we have been listening to people and trying to find solutions that work. And as part of the work of the Commission, we have held a number of evidence sessions where we've listened to experts, practitioners, and most importantly, young people themselves on a range of issues, including youth services, trauma and mental health, education and housing. And I've visited numerous youth organisations and projects across the country. And our last session took place yesterday and covered policing and the criminal justice system. And we also had an interesting discussion on drugs. Some believe if we legalise drugs, that would be enough to stop the drugs market. Others rightly identify the disparity between the treatment of, say, a young white kid caught with drugs at university and a young black kid caught with drugs on a street corner. The law isn't implemented indiscriminately. Black people are twice as likely as white people to be charged with possession of drugs, despite lower rates of drug use. One thing we agreed on was the importance of educating people on the societal impact of recreational drug use. Many people today are conscious of where they get their clothes from, their coffee from, their meat. But there is a blind spot when it comes to the illegal drug market. Many of the people who are so careful to only buy fair trade coffee and wear ethically sourced clothes are the same people who do cocaine at the weekends, with no consideration of the wider impact of this habit. Perhaps if there were educational programmes on the real harm caused by the drug market, more people would treat cocaine with the same disdain they do clothes made in sweatshops or eggs from caged hens.
Yeah. Lady's making a compelling argument, and it associates that middle-class so-called recreational drug use with the normalisation of drugs and with the supply lines that do so much damage. One person's recreation is another person's misery.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and I think this is probably one area that we would genuinely have a cross-party consensus on this. Some other clear things have emerged from the Commission's evidence sessions and the visits I've undertook. In fact, the government's serious violence strategy is much that aligns with our work, in particular our focus on early intervention. Early intervention is critical. Many young people who are affected by serious crime, either as a victim or a perpetrator, have themselves been subjected to adverse childhood experiences. As a result, they grow up with unaddressed trauma and mental health issues, which can make them extremely vulnerable to negative influences. So support mechanisms are crucial. Young people need to have consistent and safe spaces where they can go for advice and support. These could be counsellors in schools, mentors or role models, community spaces or grassroots charities and organisations. Right now, too many young people don't have access to any of these. We must do more to provide the training and the funding for these types of activities. Prevention is always better than the cure. In this case, prevention will undoubtedly save lives. One thing we've definitely learnt from our work is that there are no quick fixes. The path to change will require long-term investment and an integrated approach for public services, the police, communities and individuals all working closely together. The Commission's work also produced a lot of questions which we must address and which are beyond the current scope of the serious violence strategy because the net has not been cast this wide yet. We must ask ourselves whether or not our school system is fit for purpose. Police officers in Lewisham have told me that the most dangerous time of day for stabbings between young people is after school and before parents come home from school. Should we therefore consider changing the hour school finishes to, say, 5 or 6 p.m? We must look at whether young children have enough positive role models in their lives. Should we look at recruiting 50% men as primary school teachers? Should we be teaching sex and relationship education at an earlier age? Perhaps teaching primary school children what a positive relationship looks like and what a negative relationship looks like. Should our teachers be trained to teach in a trauma-informed way? Should we have dedicated police in all our schools, including primary schools, building up that trust with our young people so that they know police officers are safe people to speak to? Should we aim to have a policy of zero exclusions in our schools? Should we revisit the school syllabus? We're actually giving our young people the life skills for future employment. For example, teaching about budgeting, getting a mortgage or investing. Should we also be teaching classes on social media that could prepare them for employment but also ensure that they're safe when they're online? Should we change our history syllabus to ensure it is more culturally diverse and representative of our communities? And are we providing the right level of mental health support for our young people in school? Then there's questions about youth service provision. How do we ensure there is less needless competition between charities and instead foster more collaboration? Time and time again, grassroots charities see the usual suspects getting funding for programmes. The large charities that are able to afford bidding teams and who know how the system works. How do we provide long-term, sustainable funding for programmes that prove they get results for smaller organisations right in the heart of our communities? As politicians, we have a responsibility to our young people and future generations to answer all these questions. There is so much more I could and do want to say, but I know that we want to ensure everybody gets into the debate. But hopefully you can see the Youth Violence Commission's work as being comprehensive and rigorous. Our initial findings will be published this summer before this summer recess, and I'm grateful that the Prime Minister has already agreed to meet with me to discuss our work. Finally, as Chair of the Youth Violence Commission, I am aware of how many previous reports and strategies successive governments have published relating to youth violence in one way or another. Many of the recommendations of these reports have never been implemented, or where they have, progress has not been evaluated. I hope that the government's serious violence strategy does not follow the same path, because young people continue to die on our streets. We owe it to them and to future generations to make sure we fix this.